raw truth of it is that hiring is a tricky thing. It is impossible to find someone that is a jack of all trades. I still believe to this day that that's the right thing to hire for. And that is the most important thing over the long run, because those are the hardest things to be able to teach. You're taking a big risk and bringing someone on unless.
Welcome to Requity Insights, a channel dedicated to documenting our journey to 100 world-class communities.
Welcome back to Requity Insights. My name is Velez, and I'm joined again by my co-host and the CEO of the Requity Group, Marma. Today we have a highly relevant and insightful episode focused on hiring best practices. Hiring is a cornerstone of success in any organization. It plays a vital role in shaping the company culture and driving results. We'll explore the importance of finding top talent that aligns with your organization's values and goals, where you should recruit top talent versus cultivating it, strategies for attracting and assessing candidates, and effective onboarding and retention techniques. Hiring is an area where companies can truly differentiate themselves. We have developed a comprehensive approach to hiring that has proven successful. Today, we'll share our experiences, strategies, and lessons learned to help our viewers enhance their own hiring processes and cultivate a thriving work environment. Dylan, could you start by telling me a little bit about your experience with hiring?
Sure thing, Lewis. Well, I love the intro, and the raw truth of it is that hiring is a tricky thing, just like managing is a tricky thing. And all this is because people are messy, right? And we're not a bunch of productive robots at all times, right? Every person is going to be unique in the sense that they're going to have their own unique flaws, quirks, emotions, and problems to deal with, right? No one is born as the perfect fit for the job, but the job must get done. So this is why we must really learn how to hire well and attract the right talent, as that's what makes everything go well and is a crucial part to any business's success. So I say that to lead with, when I was first suggested to speak on this topic, my initial reaction is that I'm going to have an easier time speaking on mistakes that we've made rather than being able to pinpoint what we've done well. But admittedly, through the mistakes that we've made, I do want to believe that we've learned a lot, and we're hopeful that we can be able to share some of our process and biggest learning lessons to be able to help you make more informed hiring decisions, because we always want to learn from other people's mistakes as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Kind of digging into that, are you able to tell us a little bit about your experience with hiring and what you've learned along the way?
Yeah, so starting off the company, we really, when I think back to it, we hired for culture and the personal qualities first and foremost. And I still believe to this day that that's the right thing to hire for. And that is the most important thing over the long run, because those are the hardest things to be able to teach.
Yeah.
However, I have learned what should be obvious, that just because you like someone, you get along with them, you're friends, or you see potential in them, it doesn't always mean that they're the right fit or they're able to grow into the role in a reasonable enough time period. Therefore, especially with particular roles, you're taking a big risk and bringing someone on unless they have a proven track record of performing. Now, I've grown aware that I tend to be the type of person that sees the best or sees the potential of people and where they could be going. So at first, I think I brought on a lot of people who I liked and I saw potential in, and I think that created a good culture, but it wasn't necessarily what I would describe as a winning culture to bring us to where we need to go long term. So I think we've learned from that. We've learned that we've made some of these mistakes and kind of boiled down the mistakes into 3 different categories. I think if you look at any hiring mistake, it's usually either because A, they're not a culture fit, B, they're not capable of the job, or C, this is just not a job that the company needs at this time. And I think we've experienced all 3 of those.
Okay, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Do you think you could elaborate on that last part that you just mentioned, on those 3 different mistakes that you made?
Yeah, so I think when you try to organize it the easiest mistake to avoid is just not hiring for a role that's not needed. This comes down to being very deliberate on the front end and thinking through the position, determining what the company's needs are, and then visualizing and writing out in detail the job requirements. And then asking yourself, is this something that one person is capable of? And could we do this equally or more effectively through outsourcing, right? And some instances that, especially as an early stage real estate company, we've found this applies to. Good examples would be when it comes to marketing and legal. So when it comes to marketing, there are so many aspects to marketing as you get into it. You have photo, video editing, graphic design, you have paid ads, Google ads. It's not just paid ads, though. It's Google, it's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's understanding all of these different algorithms and then understanding your social media content strategy. And there are so many different components to marketing that it's virtually impossible. It is impossible to find someone that is a jack of all trades when it comes to marketing. So oftentimes you find that as an early stage company, you may be better off outsourcing to specialists within the different areas that you're trying to improve on. And the same can be said when it comes to our attorneys, because we work with general attorneys, more property management focused attorneys, more transactional real estate attorneys, tax attorneys, and then SEC attorneys, right? Yeah. You're never going to be able to hire one person that can do all of it. If you could, they'd be $1 million a year because they're the greatest attorney on earth. But, right, so you're usually better off going and finding specialists that you can work for in contract basis. So that's just something to think about when you're thinking about, is this a job that the company needs at this point in time? And I think that'll change and evolve as you grow. Then the second type of mistake is just catching culture fit, right? Making sure that when you're interviewing, you're confirming that the person that you're bringing on is the right culture fit. And that can be done largely, I would say it starts with trying to bring down their interview wall. And I think bringing down the interview wall comes with just time and drilling down sometimes the tough questions. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got from an early mentor of mine when it comes to hiring was that you are not there to sell the person on the job, right? You're not, your job as an interview is not to say how great we are and why you should work with us, right? Hopefully your marketing job post has already done that. Now they're interested, they're sold on wanting the job. And now you're there to get to the core of who they really are by peeling back the layers of the onion. So interviews are where you need to ask the tough questions and see how they respond to those questions. Do they respond well? Do they get emotional? Are there certain areas and certain questions that you ask that seem to trigger them? What's behind that? Dig deeper and deeper, right? Until you can try to best identify who someone is at the core, because it's easy to put on an interview face, and if you're asking surface level questions, it makes it even easier for them to fool you. So you really want to spend the time and get to the core of who people are, and that takes time, and it's time well spent because it'll save you time and money at the back end if you're able to do it effectively. The third and probably the toughest mistake that is hiring someone without the proper capabilities. Now, some roles, they need limited experience. Some roles, you think about the front desk staff at a hotel or an RV campground. Yeah. As long as they have great attitude, you can really teach them all the basics. As long as you can use really basic technology skill sets. But if you have a good attitude, you show up on time, you greet people well, and you care about the team around you, I think you can pick that role up. Whereas other roles need extensive experience, and usually the first place my mind goes with that is accounting, right? You wouldn't just hire someone for having a good attitude and hope that they're going to be able to do your books for you and take care of the month-end close every month, right? You need someone with years of education and experience to confirm that they're right fit in a seat like that. So this is somewhat role dependent, but I strongly recommend testing for capabilities by giving sample work that the candidate can do in between interviews. And if you don't possess the technical skill set, you should definitely find someone, even if you don't know someone, go find a contractor on Upwork or someone else that could be there for that interview to help you assess the technical skill sets, right? I'm not going to be someone that's going to sit there and hire accountants without having someone else that's a CPA on the call with me to help vet the skill sets, because I'm easier to fool because I don't have that background, right? So some of my questions are going to be low balls compared to what a trained and experienced accountant is going to be able to provide. And the same thing goes with any skill set, be it, property management, anything you're hiring for, really, right? So I think you definitely make sure you have someone with that technical skill set on the call with you, and then ask the hard questions and send them samples of their work, because I'm sometimes amazed where someone will have a 5 or 10 year track record of in a certain role, and then you start asking some basic questions and you just scratch your head, you're like, how did you do this for 10 years? And we can't answer like some of these more elementary level roles, right? So definitely gotta make sure you're vetting for skills and not just assuming it because they have a resume that looks good that matches.
Yeah, so it's 3 parts. You're asking tough questions, you're giving them some sample work, and you're also vetting for skills. When you're asking those tough questions, do you have a process for that? Is that part of a phased out interview process? So, are you sprinkling in some of the technical questions with the tough questions in one interview, or are you kind of going through like a interview 1, interview 2, interview 3 process?
Yeah, so our process varies. A lot of times we have more of a surface level screening call that we'll record with someone on the administrative team to verify, that they passed the basic qualities. We watch the recording and make sure they seem like a fit. And then the secondary interview is where we have more of the hardball questions, right? Where we really want to get to know someone. And a lot of our questions are geared around our company's core values, and we're trying to sort of identify if they are, culture fit. And then we get more into the in-depth technical skill set questions. And we try to ask questions that are mostly experiential. What I've found and learned is that you usually do better and you can learn more from asking someone about their past experience. Tell me a time where you have seen this. Tell me about a past experience where this has happened. Tell me about a former employer or manager where you ran into difficulties. Tell me about a former time you ran into difficulties with a coworker, right? Those sort of things, when you're asking them about an actual experience, you're more likely to be able to get a gauge on raw, emotions and what the real response was, versus saying, how would you respond if your coworker was misbehaving, right? Like, they're going to be, it's easier for them to give a more scripted answer, versus when they're telling you about an actual experience in their life, you're more likely to see them light up and kind of gauge, how do they respond? Did they get, angry and upset? Were they combative? Or, are they taking responsibility or being more the victim in that situation? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's easy for people to say what they think you want to hear versus if you're asking for specifics.
It's hard to just color the line on the spot, right? As if they are, that's scary, but that's usually they could do the real.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to kind of wrap that question up, the process itself is 1 or 2 interviews. Is that what it looks like?
It really depends on the role. We have a pretty conventional process where we'll start with a screening interview, followed by 1 or 2 full-fledged interviews, depending on the role. Yep. There are some roles where our regional managers usually are the first to interview, and then they'll sign off on the role on the spot. That'd be more for our support level roles, where there are other roles where we have a more extensive process, especially when it comes to on the property management side, hiring for the management roles, or on the corporate side, hiring for the corporate roles, where we'll have a lot more team members involved. Need doing a lot more diligence because we really need to get these hires right. Yeah. And we want to have more hands involved on those processes. But one thing I personally have a tendency to do is, especially for corporate level hires, I just pick up the phone and start calling candidates on Indeed. Sometimes it shocks them that, the principal of the company is just calling them directly sometimes on a Saturday, just instead of a call and interview. But I think that it's a competitive market and we want to show a sense of urgency. And I think some of our managers have taken to that as well, versus sitting back and just sending prompts on Indeed for, a week from now, right? We really need it. When you see good talent or someone that looks like they have potential, we want to move quickly. And that's the part that is more the sales part is good job posts, act with urgency to get them on the phone. But then once they've agreed to the call, at that point, you're now not selling anymore. You're there to interview, and they should the right fit.
Yeah, then that's almost the initial question of the interview, right? Like their willingness to hop on a call on a Saturday and see what happens, you know?
Yeah, we definitely had a few.
So we've talked a lot about, corporate and also property level, but getting specific on the corporate level, what does your corporate team look like?
Yep. So our corporate team, or what we call the leadership team, is generally a pretty lean overall team. Many people, a lot of entrepreneurs that I talked to early on when we were starting the company or prior to that, you hear a lot of people with all different advice that often contradicts each other, but a lot of them will say hire early and hire often and always be hiring for preparing for future growth. And my overall objective is to keep the corporate team pretty lean, but with the right people to be highly effective at the same time. Because as I think you actually, by being lean in a smart way, I think you actually can have higher output. I'll explain a little bit more as to why. But we don't want, as an investment company, we judge our success based on our profitability and how good of investments we make over time, right? Not how many investments we make. So we don't want to be in a position where we have this crazy overhead that puts us in a position to do deals just to feed the beast, so to speak, right? And just cover our payroll and that kind of thing. So by staying lean, we actually believe we're going to be more effective and we'll be able to think more clearly because we won't have that, outside measure, either consciously or subconsciously, weighing on us in that sense. So having more people not only requires more financial bandwidth from the company, but it also requires more communication infrastructure, which by nature is going to lead to slight bureaucracy or can slow down productivity, right? If now you have so many people to manage that you have to have the calendar lined up with meetings for half of the day every single day, then you have a lot less time to focus on what actually needs to get done. Whereas when you have a more lean team that's actively working together, a lot of us in the same office, and if we're not, we're talking all the time. That gives us the ability to move quicker because it's easier to kind of keep everyone in sync, and you're not as worried about losing people or making sure that everyone's on the same page. When you have a smaller team, it's just a little bit easier to operate in that sense. So I think you have more time, and you're able to have the highest level people on your team doing the highest productivity activities most often versus holding too many meetings. So I say that, people look at us and say, well, you have over 60 people across your companies, but that's because a lot of our team is on the property level, and we're almost in like pots, so to speak, where, we're all somewhat the size of startups. Our corporate team is less than 10 people, our leadership team. Then we have our property level teams that are generally less than 10 people. Some bigger properties might be a little bit more, but we're all the size of startups, and we try to empower our managers to have autonomy, to be able to lead their teams well, so that we don't need to give constant oversight to them, right? And we want them to be able to, add value to the properties and pick the right people to work on their properties, and that allows us to all be most productive. And we've had to go through definitely some different spans of expansion and then contraction to learn this, but I'm definitely a big believer, continue to be a big believer, that having centralization at the corporate level for investment or allocation decisions, and knowing that if you do that right, it's going to like be more decentralized at the level of the operating companies, which I think is a healthy way to be able to scale over time.
Yeah. So I've heard you say that we operate a little bit more like a sports team and not like a family. Do you think you could elaborate on what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, I think it's more just a general philosophy towards, creating a winning culture in a company, right? We've used the words, we're a family, we're a team, right? But I prefer to use the words we're a team over we're a family, because I think a family is together forever, no matter what. You can't pick your family, right? So, you're going to live with all the challenges, the drama, the disabilities, right? Anything that we have in our family, right? We're going to love them, support them, and we're going to be there for them, no matter what. And that's because, that's what family is, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to a sports team, sports teams support each other in the same way and they treat each other like family during the time that they are there, but they also need to make sure that they're winning at the end of the day, right? They need to have the right skills and the right chemistry and the ability, the communication as a team to be effective, to be able to achieve their overall mission. And a sports team, some people are not going to be there forever, right? Some are going to be there for a season, some are going to be there for a few seasons, and some are going to be there for a lifetime. And I think that's much more truthful and accurate as to what a winning company culture looks like. So, it's perfectly fine, too. Obviously, it's not a culture of everyone's got to be on their A game perfect all the time. We know that, people are going to have off seasons or down days, but over the long run, we want to make sure that the people that are on the team are, contributing as an asset to the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that analogy. So when hiring, what exactly are you looking for in a person?
So when it comes to hiring, I mentioned we touch on our core values, but every company is going to have their own unique core values. I'll try to boil it down to the 3 core things that I look for when interviewing someone. I think a lot of our team does. Number 1 is, do they think like an owner and take responsibility, right? We want people that take extreme ownership of the outcome of what takes place. If they're the manager for a property, if they're running plan on acquisition, running plan on due diligence, they're running plan on asset management, they're running plan on accounting or investor relations, right? So we want people that take pride in their role, they take pride in their results, and, when mistakes happen, they own them. And, they're going to figure it out and make sure that they learn from them for the future, right? Because our goal, again, is to hire someone that we can eventually let them just run and to be able to step out of the way and give them the autonomy so that we can be effective at scaling as a company, right? Yeah. So thinking is our number 1. Number 2 is, will they tell you the full truth? We want to hear when there are issues, and we want to hear it early and often, right? We know that there are issues on our properties, and there's always going to be, capital expense surprises or fluctuations in occupancy or hiring challenges or management challenges, right? And it's more concerning when we're not hearing them than when we're hearing them often. But when we hear them often, we know that we can trust the person we're dealing with, and they're letting us know. Hopefully they're proactively trying to be solution-oriented and coming forward with a problem and a solution at the same time, not just expecting everyone else to figure it out. But that's, I think, a crucial quality is, will you tell us the full truth? And we try to do all we can to provide it to our investors at the same time, right? So it kind of flows down in that same way. We want, our investors to know when there's issues and be upfront and honest in those situations. And last is, just do they check the box from more of an attitude and culture perspective? Howard Schultz had a saying, I think he was asked once in an interview about how he managed to keep his people so happy. And he said the secret was that he hires people that like to smile, right? So if you want to have people happy, you're not going to take someone that's grumpy all the time and make them happy because you have a great company or you can't pay them enough to change their attitude. You have to hire people that are naturally happy. And again, especially depending on the role, right? Front desk staff could be different than an accountant. Use an analogy again, but that's always the best thing is hire people that seem to have those characteristics of people that you want to admire and be around. Evan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great tip, what you said about wanting your managers, whether they're on-site or regional, to bring you a lot of problems, but to also present them with solutions at the same time. If they've thought about it and, they're not just coming to you to look for a solution. So I think that's huge.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind, what are some red flags that you would normally be in a candidate?
Yeah, so red flags that come to mind, people that speak poorly about their former employer. Don't get me wrong, there are bad situations, but don't lead the conversation with that. I think it's usually wise for people to not lead an interview that way, no matter how they feel in those situations. But yeah, seeing kind of that more of a victim mentality, especially when there's a pattern of it where, it's always my employer's fault or always my manager's fault or my, customer's fault. And because chances are that pattern is going to stay the same once they're on board with us. So we don't want much of that. People that are just not showing up on time or have to reschedule without, valid reason why. I mean, interview is your first impression, so you should do everything possible to be available, be early, and be ready. If that's how you're treating an interview, then chances are once you're in, it's going to be even tougher. So yeah, I think it's really important to get that first impression right. People that are more selfish versus team-oriented. We are a team. We play as a team, and I can think about most of our people in our company, and one thing I think many of us share is that we are looking out for the team and the bigger picture, and it's not this competitive in a negative sense where it's about just looking good and being better than the people around you. I think we all operate in a way where we're all trying to make the group better. And people that are hesitant to acknowledge their weaknesses. So one of the big red flags for me is when you get this, I like to think of them like the salesman interviews where, they get on the call and they are just polished and saying everything so well and trying to make themselves look perfect the entire time. And anytime you try to ask them about their flaws or their issues or anything negative, they quickly are able to spin it. And that's concerning to me, because for someone that's not able to be vulnerable or to admit to their mistakes, I mean, chances are once they're in, it's going to be the same thing. And that goes back to, are you able to tell us the truth? Because if you're spitting everything all the time, then we're not really getting the straight answer. And it's a lot for us to deal with, right? We have too much going on to have to try to play that game of trying to see through what the real situation is, right? So, lastly, again, people that don't smile often, I say that more so just people that just have a poor attitude, right? That are lower energy, not really upbeat on life, just, maybe just give you that overall downer feel when you're on the call with them, because, we are somewhat of a high energy company, and, we all are overall positive people for the most part. And I think it's important that even someone's going to fit in with our culture and not be draining the energy levels overall. So definitely getting that right, especially for the customer facing positions.
So kind of touching on what you just mentioned, people who put a spin on negative situations and you viewing it as something that's not the greatest way to answer because it kind of doesn't expose their vulnerability. Do you think that that's been encouraged by self-help books or interviewing books that tell you put a positive spin on everything?
Yeah, I definitely think that our society as a whole does somewhat reward that behavior in some ways. And I realized for myself that coming from a sales background, when I started my career, I had to somewhat unlearn that skill set as I got more into investing, as I think it's important to just be objective, or it's something that we all struggle with, but that we can work to be as objective as possible. And in a lot of scenarios, that is required. But it depends somewhat on the position. But I would say yes, society does seem to reward that behavior. Even a lot of CEOs and leaders of great companies today tend to be masters of spin and constantly trying to make it sound like everything's good and things are okay, and this is going to be great, blah, 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 right? And I mean, there may be times where it can be warranted, right? As maybe for morale purposes, you need to be able to keep morale up and view things in a positive light. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't view things, see the silver lining in your problems. I think it's great to be able to do that and think positively, but I think that ignoring the issues themselves and trying to revert everyone's attention to the good thing that's happening over here is a bigger issue and can be destructive for company if everyone is doing that, to not be able to identify the issues and work on them proactively, right? So I guess when it comes to that, that's one of those things where I'd prefer someone that is objective in how they're going to be able to communicate and they are vulnerable with flaws or mistakes that they've made, but they can definitely spin it in the sense of in a positive way of yes, but this is what I've done to overcome that, and this is the action that I've taken as a result of that. I think that's important, and I think I like to hear that, but not necessarily spinning it in a way where you're just acting as if there are zero issues to begin with, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So speaking on you directly as the CEO of this company, what role do you play and what interviews are you personally involved with?
So for me, I am definitely involved with all the corporate team hiring decisions. I think the most important thing I get right is that we have the right leadership team in place, which consists of, on the operations side, the right regional managers in place, and then having the right finance and accounting team, acquisitions, and investor relations team, and making sure we nail that is going to be most important. And a lot of that trickles down because as we get the right regional managers in place and they're trained up and we have good culture here, then that should relate down to the properties as well, because they have the right leadership in place, which I think the rising tide lifts all ships, and they will attract and retain the right people as a result of that. But I am still involved, and probably for a long time will still be involved with the hiring of our on-site managers, because we view the managers like basically CEOs of the properties that they're running, and we want to be able to trust in them that they're going to make the right decisions on the fly and make the right hiring decisions for their support teams and make the right decisions for our customers. So I'm involved with the decisions for the managers themselves, and then when it comes to our support roles, I am not involved with those decisions, and I want our regionals, our operations team, and our managers to be able to make their own decisions and also learn from their own mistakes over time. So I think there's value in that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dylan, for giving us that sneak peek into PRD's hiring process. We hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights and actionable tips on how to hire. Hiring the right talent is fundamental to our success, and I'm glad that we could shed some light on the strategies that we've worked with and that have worked for us. Thank you again for watching this episode of Requity Insights. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back soon with some more thought-provoking discussions, and until next time, guys, see you later.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Requity Insights hosted by our team at the Requity Group. You can find recordings of all shows along with our opt-in form to set up a call and view future investment offerings on our company website, therequitygroup.com, also listed in the show notes.